Okay. Call into order the Quiet Zone Working Group meeting of September 18th, 2025. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. It's been a lot. So I think in the room, we have Marianne, Katie, Duncan, Karis, and Dave. And online, I can see that we have John and Lars, and Sam and Dan are here to help us. And we have a guest this evening who is listening. So there we go. This is the first meeting of the committee in quite a while, and it's intended to update with what has happened over the summer and give us a chance to talk about what our plan is going to be for town meeting in October, given the information that we have available to us today. So with that, let me turn it over to Katie, to Karis, who's gonna take the.
Sure, I can start. And there's minute approvals if you want to take that.
If we could take a look at the minutes of March 26th, which I guess is when we last met. Are there any changes or corrections?
I move their acceptance.
If there are no changes or corrections, we will put it on file.
Okay.
Okay, all good.
Good.
Thank you.
You didn't take a vote.
You don't need to vote
Don't need to
minutes
vote?
if there's no changes or corrections. That's Robert's
Oh.
rules.
Okay. Oh.
It makes me crazy when we do this. So, all right. The next item on the agenda then is the project update, starting first with the Quiet Zone design.
Great, thank you, Chair. So I was not at your last meeting. This is my first Quiet Zone Working Group meeting, so thanks for.
Welcome, Katie.
Yeah, it's nice to meet Duncan and Lars. I hope we get a chance to meet in person. And so I started in the town manager role in July, and at that time, Karis and the DPW team, working with Dan and Sam on the consultant side, had been working on the design for the Quiet Zone, trying to get estimates, and I think following operationally, trying to get information that was needed for the design from the MBTA, to make sure that we fully had the information needed to build out the design, but also to understand the process to bring the kind of project to fruition, and what's the role of the T, what's the role of Keolis, what's the role of the town. And so I would just jump in. When I jumped in, the conversation really was that we had not really been hearing back from the T about some of the technical requests that the team needed, and then also not getting a ton of clear guidance about process and kind of how we partner and advance this project in coordination with the T and Keolis. So I will just jump ahead to say, after kind of a lot of back and forth with the T, we did end up getting a meeting with the chief operating officer of the T and had a good discussion with him. He had been briefed previously by members of his team on the project, but one of the things that kind of came out of that meeting, we clarified our requests, and we're trying to get an understanding of why we hadn't been able to get the information we were seeking. And part of that meeting's conclusion was that the scope of the project, the CEO thought it was much smaller than what it actually was, and that I think he hadn't realized the extent to which we'd be upgrading the T's infrastructure. So he asked for more time to look further at the materials we sent, asked for some follow-up information, and we sent all of that. I would just say that was the very end of August, and we had agreed, after we had a chance to review, we kind of checked back in. We have not been able to kind of hear back or get a follow-up meeting to that. And so, of course, the timeline and the clock is ticking towards town meeting. And, we had to bring the group together given our timeline constraints, relative to our town meeting calendar.
Katie, the one thing that I think is important to say, when you say we have not been able to get a meeting, I need to be clear with people, it's not for lack of trying on the town's part to make that happen. So people just need to understand that.
Right. So I don't know if we want to switch to kind of the more technical stuff, or kind of where that leaves us from my perspective, from a big picture.
So I don't know, I think I would like to hear some technical perspective on what's presented here. And I would also like to be sure that we understand the numbers that are presented here and the degree to which the contingency here just represents the degree of risk because we haven't been able to confirm information with the T. So I just want some insight on that.
Curious with Jan.
Yeah, I can start off on that. Yeah, so basically, I'll let Sam talk a little bit more about the rail signal components more specifically, but in putting the estimate together, this 10% estimate, Sam has had conversations with Keolis and obviously he's
Just
familiar.
one question. What does 10% estimate mean? What is 10 as opposed to 50% as opposed to 0%? What does 10% mean?
It's a 10% estimate. It's a conceptual cost estimate based on the concepts that we prepared. And Sam can tell you a little bit more about the information that we would need to get that to a more advanced level of estimate. So he included, certain elements, and I'll let him talk about those. As far as the roadway elements go, we included the sidewalk construction that needed to happen. We assumed pavement milling and overlay and the project limits, and an estimate of pavement markings and signage. So that's what the roadway number reflects. As far as the $250,000 allowance for traffic signal improvements, there are modules that need to be added to each of the coordinated controllers. And there may, in the process of coordinating with the adjacent intersections, the need for some equipment tweaks. I think at Great Plain Ave and Chestnut, there's a left turn indication that might be helpful, but that'll be coordinated further on as we get more into it. But Sam, I think it'll be helpful for you to talk about what we did get from the T and what we were still looking for from the T and how that would have informed our estimate there and what you did include in this 10%.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just for John, so what they're working on is a 10% design, so they weren't able to get beyond 10% design process because of the documentation that they have. So their estimate for cost is only based on that 10% design.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and to add to that, we've shown this 30% design contingency because it is very much based upon conceptuals at this time. There is a lot of unknowns. The objective of the design team is as the project progresses, as the design becomes more and more mature, that design contingency gets less and less and less. The unknowns become knowns through the process, and a lot of that, a lot of the unknown will be clarified through teaming with Keolis, and just to jump off from that call that we had the other day, I think it was very, very encouraging with Ryan, the COO over there. I'm very hopeful that we're going to get Keolis involved in this a lot more than they have been. But to add on what we have received, MBTA has shared with us the in-service electrical designs, as you could say, the rail signal design plans for the entire stretch of line that runs through Needham. For the town's information, that includes what I would call really three divisions there. There's the grade crossing designs, the wayside designs, which are actually the train signals that they run on. And then the third one would be communications and PTC. Those are kind of the three aspects of what they have shared with us. We do have the in-service plans, but those don't necessarily help us to our design, because for us, the in-service grade crossing plans will essentially be what we call void. They will be replaced with new grade crossings that are able to support the infrastructure that has been requested by the diagnostic team. And so as such, we additionally requested from Keolis, let's call it like an exemplary grade crossing, a grade crossing that was recently installed on their property with all associated equipment that meets their current standards. They shared that, and that is actually what we utilize to base our estimates on, and that's why we have it broken up per grade crossing. In the rail signal industry, they're generally looked at as individual locations, even though there are interconnections. They modify each other. When you're building an entire system like this, all the components are connected. But we have been able to get what we would call a very up-to-date standard, which Keolis and MBTA will like these designs to be. If they're being touched, being modified, well, they have to meet their standards. And that's where this 10% estimate has been generated from, is some of their most recent standards. In the top, you will see we kind of talk about what each one of the grade crossing, that's like pre-wired signal enclosures. Those are the cabinets and stuff you see off to the side at each one of the grade crossings that operates the lights, the gates, the warning devices. This also operates the train detection. That's the track circuits that actually detect the train and activate the warning systems. Those are called constant warning time devices. Those are required per the quiet zone rule. So that's a big one. And that's one of the major upgrades that we have to do, and why the current designs are not sufficient. The only one today is Rosemary. And that is kind of represented in the cost, and why Rosemary is one of the least expensive, because it already has some aspects of this. So, additionally, during the initial diagnostics on-site meetings, MBTA let us know some of their requirements in regards to conduit and cabling that would be required under both the roadways and the tracks at every one of these. That has been incorporated into them on a per site basis. And communication equipment. What that's going to get into is currently MBTA's network that runs along your rail line is an aerial fiber optic cable on pole line. In discussions with them, that is not their current standard. Their current standard is a buried line. The PTC network is a safety critical network. It's what ensures train operators don't make mistakes and run trains into each other. Unfortunately, with the fiber being aerial, it is vulnerable to vandalism. And specifically, as much as you don't want to hear about it, gunfire. People do fire at cables in the air. And so there's a potential that with this project, there's going to be a required for us to bury that cable along the right of way to bring these locations up to standard. As we install these new rail signal houses, obviously things are going to move around. That will require splicing the fiber optic cable to be able to reach the new locations. Anybody knows anything about fiber optics, with every splice, the signal gets weaker and weaker. And so even things such as this can predicate that we replace the fiber with new runs to limit the amount of splicing actually in their comms line. These comms lines go all the way back to downtown. I'm pretty sure, I don't know the address, but it does go to their central dispatching and signal system.
Yeah.
And as it gets into positive train control and wayside modifications, the last two items, as part of their PTC system, they have targets that they must meet. And I'm going to use an example here. When grade crossings malfunction or somebody reports a failure, the PTC system will actually enforce on trains to ensure that they don't just blow through the crossing on a potential failure. So with us widening these crossings, we're actually modifying, we're adjusting the targets, as you can say. And when the, as they call them, orders are put on the crossing for to protect the traveling public, they have to modify their back office PTC to adjust those targets. And anytime you crack open the PTC network, this was a number actually given to me by Keolis that it's costing them about $500,000 per project, just to update their PTC back office. And then lastly, the wayside modifications. Everybody's probably seen the signals around the platforms there. As part of this project, there will be certain modifications we have to do to how those signals clear upon train departure from the stations, essentially to ensure that the trains aren't charging the grade crossings. As part of this project, there will be a number of preemption modifications. Preemption involves the interconnection of the grade crossings with the traffic signals. There are a number of new standards that have to be met. Even with the 11th edition of the MUTCD, it came out less than 2 years ago now, and there's a number of things that that even Dan led to earlier, with like certain turn restrictions and stuff that will most likely need to be upgraded at the traffic signals. But for those wayside changes, it involves the preemption timing. How do we ensure that we're clearing vehicles off of the grade crossings before we allow the train through? And those changes, those times, fold into the wayside signal system. And that's where we have that that lump sum of $250,000, because that is one of the big unknowns today too. And again, why we really do require that 30% contingency, because there's just so many unknowns this early in a project.
And those unknowns would be fewer if the T were actually working with us.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The design would actually be progressing much further than 10% right now. One of the items we have requested but have not received involves the actual in-service CAD files. We've got the designs in PDF format. Obviously, we can view them, but doing a design on PDFs is not a fun event, and so we're just looking for more, more coordination between us. Ultimately, Keolis is MBTA's design and maintenance operator, so they will have design oversight ultimately. And when and if we get Keolis finally involved in the review process, they will be reviewing and approving the designs as we get the 30, 60, 90 levels, and that they agree with everything we're proposing. As we progress toward those, with them sharing information, will allow us to, to get to those 30, 60, 90 levels.
Okay. When we started this process in the spring, we were, I don't know, a week out or something like that, as I recall from the diagnostic review. So we had fully expected that we were going to be at, 90% design or something at this point in the process. So we're at a different place, because the answer is we had a diagnostic review, and then we really didn't get much beyond that. We received the PDFs, but that was about it, I think, until the recent meeting that gave us hope, but now we're sort of sitting again. All right, so I just wanted to be sure that everybody on the committee had a sense of where we were at this point. I guess I'll just say I had a conversation with some folks from Chelsea today. And while I'm not going to go into the bulk of that conversation, I will say that Chelsea is in a similar position. they actually have a complete design that was submitted 6 weeks ago. And then they've had no further interaction or response since then. So, so they are also, continuing in their fits and starts through the process. Also looking for assistance from the team. So what's important, I think, to consider on this is, you know, yes, I am grateful to our engineering team for giving us a price, but that's not a particularly informed price. And it comes without actually a path forward with the MBTA at this point. Or at least I can't say that we have a path forward. Karis, would you say we have a path forward?
Not that we've been able to figure out yet.
Okay. So, open for discussion, but my recommendation would be that on the quiet zone, we are not in a position to go to town meeting in October as we had hoped. It's not for lack of effort on many people's parts, but we are not in a position to have adequate information and a plan that we can take to the town.
I concur. But I would like just a little information on the design contract, how much the contract is, how much was spent, how much is left to be done. I don't have a good sense of that. If someone could just provide me with a framework of, in other words, we're at 10% now. We hope to get to 30, 60, 90, 100%, obviously. What is that ultimate, contract and how much has been expended and what is encumbered but not yet spent?
I will have to get back to you and back to the committee with the details specifically.
Please, yeah.
One of the larger components of the initial project was really getting that diagnostic review component done, in which it required on-site walkthrough of the town with the consultant, FRA, MBTA, and Keolis. And that was a big lift of this project in addition to the design, because that's where we all agreed on what standards we were going to adhere to in the design. So I can certainly look through what we have and where we are. And I recall that we did not have the full amount of the appropriation encumbered with our current contract, but I can get you the specifics.
Yeah, the reason why I asked, Karis, is let's just say this number is 7.6 million, right? Does that include in it additional design funds to get to 100% design, or is that number exclusive of any design costs?
So it didn't include any design. I don't believe our current contract has any contract administration as part of the project. So as far as like overseeing the project work itself, but as far as getting to biddable construction documents, that was the initial contract that we had entered into.
Okay. Yeah, so if you could get that, just an update or a snapshot on that as we currently sit, that would be helpful. Thank you.
When we talk about that we have requested CAD files, but we have PDF files, are we talking about the layout of the infrastructure? Are we talking about the technical stuff that's in the cabinets? What is it that we're seeking?
It's actually both. The railroad operates on they've got like overall maps, as they would call them. They're truthfully, Keolis calls them single lines. That's just they represent the rail as a single line rather than two rails. And it's kind of a map that shows all the locations throughout the stretch of track. And we've got a wayside cabinet here, we got a grade crossing here, we got another wayside cabinet here. Kind of gives them an overall view, and those are utilized as like an overall project scope document where we show all of these locations along the right of way need to be touched. And then flowing down from that, they do have individual print sets of each location with all of the rail signal components included. Communication network switches, the constant warning time devices, the warning devices themselves, the gate mechs, the motors, the battery backup systems, that have to go into those cabinets. These are all components that are actually represented on these plans, and we have them literally only in PDF format.
But so I guess for what's in the cabinets, technically, isn't that just diagrammatic in nature? Or are you saying it physically is like in other words, I'm trying to understand why we need that in CAD as opposed to PDF. If it's a cabinet that's got switchgear in it or whatever, isn't it just a series of diagrammatic indications and labels of this switch is set to this set? I mean, and I'm just thinking of like, I've looked at the construction documents for the Chelsea system, not the 6 week ago one, but like maybe the 2 year ago one. But, you know, it looked to me like it was essentially, it showed a cabinet, not unlike electrical cabinet, and just said this switch is set to this setting and this switch is set to that setting. I guess I'm just trying to understand, why does that need to be in CAD? Can't we work off a PDF for that?
So Sam will address, but Lars, I think that with the addition of PTC, which has happened to both Chelsea, who had to redo their design, and was already done for us, that may have changed some things, so.
Right, but I guess I'm just trying to understand. So like, it sounds like essentially we are unable to make progress because we're waiting for whomever outside of our control to give us information or materials that we need. And I'm questioning whether some of those materials really need to be in CAD. And then my next question would be for things like the physical layout of the road and where the intersections occur, notwithstanding that it would obviously be better if we had cooperative partners who could give us that information. Is it that hard for us to go do survey of existing conditions and create that information in CAD if that's what we really need? And I guess I would say, at least in my experience, if we're talking about 10% going to 50% or whatever the design review process steps, can we make more advancements based on conceptual sort of layout information? Because until you get to construction documents, it's not all right anyway. I'm just trying to understand if there's some way we can make progress without looking for CAD everything. If we're relying on someone else giving us that CAD, can we create it for ourselves or just not need it?
So Dan, don't let me speak for you. We have talked about progressing the intersections, specifically the railroad intersections, progressing that into a more 30% phase. We will proceed on that. The issue comes into, there will be, let's call them the different disciplines of the engineering, will be at different stages. Yes, you know, we do have the PDFs of the in-service, but the thing is the in-service, none of it is remaining. It is all antiquated, installed in the 90s. The only, like I said, the only one location that's more up to date than the others is Rosemary Street. One of the large, let's call it goals for this project, is figuring out how to fit in these signal cabinets. Today, they're cases. They're very thin cases, not any more than 3 or 4 foot deep, and they fit along the rail line. Keolis's current standard is a 10 by 12 signal house, much larger than anything that's been put along the right of way here. What that means is that even the example plans that they provided us, that is like their current standard, we will have to modify those. We're going to have to go with a custom signal enclosure that will be designed to fit along the right of way, and none of the layouts presented to us will be the layout that we will be providing. That is purely the way that this project will have to go because of restricted right of way. Keolis has mentioned it multiple times. They're going to be intrigued once they can review them, how we're going to fit everything along the right of way. And you know, that's Benish's scope to figure that out.
So I guess 2 questions with that would be, as has been talked about in previous working group conversations, And Karis I was at a meeting with her years ago, now a couple years ago, where she rightly helped them sort of point this out, which is they don't really have sort of their own capital replacement plan that they're operating under. But to the extent that the existing equipment is antiquated and at some point close to needing replacement in and of itself, how do they intend to respond to their own new standards relative to their existing right of way to replace the cabinets as it is? In other words, from my understanding, the additional brains needed for Quiet Zone are not massively consuming of additional cabinet space. So it would seem they already have a problem they need to solve anyway. I'm just trying to understand whether are we being asked to solve a problem they wouldn't even solve themselves? Firstly, and secondly,
Can we
Yeah.
let Katie respond to that?
Sure.
Hold for a second, let's let Katie go.
Yeah, just to say that, the conversation that we did have with the T, part of it was this PDF versus CAD discussion, but the other part of it was very much once there was a realization that the scope that we were proposing really does address their existing capital needs, that kind of was when the T pivoted and said, oh, wait, we need to look at this more closely. Can you send us everything? So I think the answer is it's still an open question, but that kind of was the point of the discussion where there was some level of optimism kind of for more partnership. But I also wanted to say, just to your earlier questions about the need for the CAD file, that, we also were talking with the T, not just about the information we need, but clarity on project initiation and who's going to approve the project and when we could see things in writing around their expectations of ongoing maintenance and liability coverage, what's on the town versus the T. So even if the CAD file showed up kind of tomorrow, I think that could advance the design, but it wouldn't necessarily advance where we feel clarity on the process and what we'd kind of be committing to. So that I just want to name that as a second kind of open question.
I just want to build on that just a tiny bit, because I think one of the things we're struggling with a little bit is we're working with an agency that subcontracts out the ownership of the rail. And so effectively, I think everyone agrees, we really should be talking to Keolis. Like, that's the one, they're the ones who have the CAD files, they're the ones who would be providing the oversight during the project, they're the ones who are reviewing our design. And the problem is MBTA holds the key to that relationship. So when we talked with the MBTA, they said to us, which we've heard before, just don't go talk to Keolis. We don't want to go through partnership. We want you to go directly to Keolis. On the other end, Keolis, for liability purposes, doesn't want to do anything that the MBTA doesn't initiate with them. So that's a little bit of what we're trying to figure out as far as how to move the project forward, because eventually we're going to want to construct on a rail. And either we want Keolis to construct on their own rail because that would make the most sense, or we need them to be there on site the entire time and supervise that construction, because ultimately their trains are going through that infrastructure. And it's still not clear to us exactly what the path forward is in order to make that happen. And that was the other half of the conversation that I still don't think has been resolved.
I'm just curious, is that same on, like, is Chelsea, since they're in the middle of the same process but ahead of us? I mean, any insight from them on how that's playing out with them? Are they in the same thing where they don't know which agency or group they should be talking to? Or, I mean, it seems odd that can't be. And again, this is not our team. This is like a.
The answer is yes, they're in the same boat that we are.
I mean, from a wider
Okay.
perspective, it's not unprecedented in other areas either. I mean, there are some projects that have been advanced to a certain stage and then sit for a while.
Sit for a while. Sam, I have a question. I want to go back for a moment. This question that you raised around the fiber optic cable.
Yes.
Was that new, or did that come out in the diagnostic review? Is that new information, or was that from the diagnostic review? I hadn't heard that before tonight.
That is new information. That is information that came out during our 10% estimate phasing as we were looking at the infrastructure and what is happening. I will say MBTA does have a project right now where they are burying the PTC lines along their right of way, all along their railroad. This aerial issue is frankly, it's a homeland security issue. FTA governs this, and it's a security issue when your only communication pathway can easily be taken down by one roadway wreck that takes out a pole.
So I understand that. I also understand what a significant cost it is to bury a line for the duration. And
Yes.
so I'm slightly encouraged to hear that they have an actual project, because then maybe they wouldn't ask us to cover that cost. But
That would be very great.
All right, so this is I guess I worry, you know, we had a diagnostic review that has a certain timeline on it. And then if they keep changing their conditions, at what point is that out of sync with where they are? So I'm a little bit concerned by this major new piece being revealed recently.
So I'd like to add another thing on top of that, and this involves the infrastructure just to support the grade crossings that we talked about here. That constant warning time upgrade
Yeah.
instantly has us adding additional comm lines along that fiber optic. The current rail design does not use these circuits, but it is their current standard. So essentially what's going to happen is there are a number of spares in the air today. They aren't utilizing all of them. We will be utilizing some of those for the grade crossing design. This is MBTA standard for, at least going back a half decade for the communication lines. My concern is that as soon as we start touching that cable for any reason at all, this could open up the entire comm line for increasing to their standard. And this will definitely have to be a negotiation and a discussion with MBTA. If they already have a project that's planned, maybe they could move up the Needham section in coordination with the grade crossings. But this is just me assuming today. Again, it requires these are the unknowns during the design process that will come up and be clarified as we proceed to 30, 60, 90s.
Okay, and I can give, I guess, a piece of information for background. Part of what happened in Chelsea's case was that they had some train control issues that had not been implemented on their line. They had hoped to implement their quiet zone ahead of PTC getting implemented there. And instead, Keolis asked them to wait until after, and then they had to go in and redo design all over again after, which has put them back in their latest waiting point. Okay, so this whole thing about being at the right point in the design and having the right design incorporated or not, and which project goes first or second, is definitely a complicating factor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. If we go to the bottom line for a moment, the bottom line is we are not ready for October. We need to figure out what the next path is forward. You know, we've had discussions about, is there a time when there's a political solution? I know they don't like political solutions coming in on top of them.
One other comment I just want to make, and I've talked to Tyne Bond about it, when we did the diagnostic review, obviously it involved multiple layers of bureaucracy. And the FRA was present at that meeting, and they were extremely in favor of this project. Again, because they were seeing an aging infrastructure, and they were seeing, again, they don't have a fundamental opposition, you know, or concern about quiet zones. And then they're also seeing all the infrastructure work that we were talking about as part of this project, and the fact that we opted to increases safety at every intersection when it wasn't necessarily required as part of implementing a quiet zone. I think they felt like this was a really great project to advocate for. Again, it was a conversation we had about at what point could we bring the FRA in to say like, we really want to get this project done. What could they do to help us advance it forward?
Yeah, we could definitely talk to FRA and see if there's an avenue for them to help talk to MBTA. I think we heard on the phone with the MBTA before that, they've kind of got this stand, squarely against quiet zones. But as Sam has pointed out, even implementing a quiet zone, you're able to do that because you're reducing the risk factor at those crossings. So perhaps FRA could aid in the conversation. We could certainly ask them if there are other avenues for them to apply pressure.
Well, I guess the other thing just to keep in mind is, notwithstanding the politics of it all, from a regulatory perspective, a quiet zone is between a municipality and the Federal Railroad Administration. The MBTA and Keolis are participants in the diagnostic team review process, but do not have an ability to actually say no.
Right.
So we need to be couching our conversations with the FRA in that framework, right? There's a political aspect we have to think about, but if they're just going to obstruct our ability to make progress, we need to find a way to move forward or not. It seems like this is a constant moving the bunny thing. I mean, they just implemented PTC on the Southern lines in 2020, and ATC, looking at their website where they're touting how they're compliant with the FRA regulations, they just put this stuff in place 5 years ago, and now suddenly it's not acceptable to be aerial, it's got to be buried. And they are in the process of doing a fiber optic resiliency project on the northern branches. They don't have any indication of a southern branch doing the same thing, but seems like we are trying to push a spring up a mountain.
Okay. I think we are gonna need to write a report to town meeting, certainly that documents where we are and what we are working on.
I guess another question, I mean, maybe this is the right place to ask it, but if they're so against quiet zones, are they working to repeal them where they exist already in Massachusetts?
Might be a hyperbolic question for this room.
No, it's not I don't mean to add, it's just,
It's Lars's rhetorical question.
it's a
Yeah.
nonsensical question.
I feel like at one point there was some news about them trying to back off on quiet zones, and maybe it wasn't even Massachusetts, it might have been somewhere else, but I also recall, I think that MBTA had recently said they really have nothing to do with this, confirming what you said, Lars.
Yeah,
That, the quiet zone gets designed, FRA tells them to do it, and they do it.
I mean, there's definitely history in Massachusetts where other quiet zones have been established.
Yeah.
Without needing to go through this full diagnostic team review process. I'm not suggesting that, but there's clearly been some sort of coordination or discussion with the FRA in the past about what processes need to be followed in order to advance things. I can't remember the name of the street off the top of my head. I can look it up, but in Cambridge, they were able to do a quiet zone without a full diagnostic team review process. But that was a case where, of course, it was a quiet zone and then it went away. And of course, when people lose it, they go out of their mind and everybody jumps to get it reestablished as fast as possible, as we've seen in Waltham. Chelsea, for whatever reason, has unfortunately not been able to do that as quickly. But
One thing I can say that your stretch of track differs than all the others is it's that constant warning time requirement. That's the stretch goal, being able to implement that at every grade crossing. Like I said, the only one out there is Rosemary. To do this, it's a complete redesign of the train detection system. So, proceeding with the design and presenting it, knowing how that will integrate with their current system, having Keolis on as a team member will make the process go much smoother. As has already been said here. Well, I mean, it's it's as Chelsea designed and then had to redesign. I myself am not looking for a large change order that gets thrown at the city in the future because we have to redesign. I'm trying to stay ahead of that. That is Benish's goal.
Well, and I can appreciate that it's not your intent to be permanently employed by the town doing designs for this, so we would hope that's not the case as well. Okay,
Mary Ann, may I ask just a couple of technical questions? Just
yeah,
to understand. So Sam, we talk about Rosemary has constant warning time. And the intended, unless this has changed, at least from the minutes we just approved, the intended solution set there is channelization. So if I understand this right, the only component that's missing is a power out indicator, which I believe is, and I'm saying this a little bit churlishly, but essentially a light bulb outside the cabin that just tells people whether there's power on or not at the intersection as they're approaching. There's not a tremendous amount of sophistication there. It's just a light to let them know there's electronics working. And then we're talking about, at least I think in our scope, we had like temporary channelization strips being bolted into the asphalt. So why is it 630 grand if we already have the constant warning time? So we're talking about a light bulb and some rubber strips with flash paddles.
This gets into how constant warning time devices interact with each other.
Yeah.
They all coexist on the same stretch of track, and therefore have to be designed with each other in mind. They actually operate in the audible frequency range. You can literally hook a speaker up to the tracks, and you can actually listen to the AC track circuits that are going along them. When we do this design, there will be modifications to Rosemary to even make it compatible with the adjacent constant warning time devices. It's great to look at these as individual locations when we break them out like this, but the reality is that they're all interconnected. They're all communicating with each other, and they all cutting one over requires you to turn on multiple others down the line at the same time. And so it really is system work. You really have to, when you're looking at a stretch of track, you have to account for everything that you potentially touch. And looking at Rosemary Street there, the biggest change with it is it's going to turn into a remote location. That's just a fancy term to say it's a helper for West Street, which is just down the way from it, meaning it's going to help West know when a train is on approach. And so these little aspects really, it's the best way to say it's systems work. Everything's interconnected and everything has to work in concert. Elsewise, you've got a non-constructible design.
Can I just also ask a question? I think that this is just based on the diagnostic review and the issues with the scissor gates. Are we also replacing the gate as part of that signal, or are we leaving the gate that's presently there in place?
I thought we were replacing.
I'd have to go back and re-review the diagnostics.
Yeah, I would just double check, because I recall when we were out in the field, we talked about replacing all the existing gates, because basically, once we started touching their stuff, we had to make it compliant, and what we have is non-compliant. So Lars, when we did the initial estimate with GPI, we were thinking we could just put down the median and the light bulb, and this includes the gates themselves as well, which I think in a better way makes it more appetizing to the MBTA, or at least from a political perspective, because we're upgrading infrastructure that right now is really not adequate.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. One of the things is as we add new gates, we'll be installing their most recent model that they use that's interchangeable with parts with all the others. When you do mixed manufacturers of gate mechanisms, you cause imbalanced power loading on the control house. And so having older gates mixed with new gates is not a healthy scenario for that grade crossing.
All right. Can we move on to the golf course for a second? More than a second, maybe? All right, so one of the matters that came up over the course of the summer or the spring, I can no longer remember exactly when it occurred, was in the discussions with the golf course and awareness of some other work that the MBTA was doing in other locations. We were back to having another discussion about the possibility of a culvert there and what might be able to be done. So the second piece that Katie just sent out later today was a request for feasibility for the golf course to take a look at the culvert possibility, which would make it so that we could eliminate that crossing essentially by virtue of putting a culvert in place. Ideally, the town wants to go forward with all of this, certainly with the bulk of the horns coming from all the other intersections. But it seemed like it would be worthwhile to get the feasibility and understand what is required to do this one particular piece at the golf course. So that is the basis for this. I want to open it up so people can ask questions related to that particular bid for feasibility. And this is something that we put a placeholder on the warrant for to bring forward. I don't know if we figured out how it gets funded yet. Dave, have we figured out how it gets funded yet?
Says the levy, tax levy.
It says the tax levy, okay.
So just wanna build on that.
I don't think,
tiny bit.
so that
Part of-
come from the FY 26 tax levy? Is that what the proposal would be?
Yes, it would be part of the FY 26 revenue stream.
But it wasn't part of the FY 26 capital budget or operating budget.
No,
I'm just, I mean, our history and experience is that feasibility studies on capital projects should be done, you know, either through free cash or, but not from the tax levy. So I don't mean to sidetrack the conversation, but I think you're gonna run into issues with the finance committee with that being the source of the appropriation.
we don't have any other legal source.
So on the technical side of it, I guess, not the financial side. So just a couple things. I think the big change that happened was also that the golf course recognized that we could not construct reasonably a culvert that was large enough to fit all of their mowing equipment. So that had sort of been the impasse, was that their mowing equipment required over 12 feet in order to pass on either side, and that really was constructing a bridge basically underneath the line. I think the change we had, we talked a little bit with them about how we maintain our fields, because we maintain in the town fields that are all over the town, and we have to plate our equipment and run our equipment over the road. And so I sort of put that out there as an idea, and they mulled on it for a little while. Because it is an operational change, it's not as efficient as how they're running now. But I think because they wanted to see this project go forward, they were willing to say, okay, we can run our maintenance a little bit different, maybe buy equipment for both sides of the train tracks instead of having them going underneath.
Or drive it around
Yes,
right outside.
yeah. And so the reason behind a feasibility study versus design is because I think there's still some logistics that need to be worked out about how it orients on their field, related to play, related to how it's, most easily constructible, and sort of where the lines are for that. Because I do think it's a little tricky where they are now, is at the high ground. But they would require some redesign in order to put it at the low ground. So getting some more information would be helpful. And also, functionally, it's just behind the other components of the project, because we are in, but we have gone through an agnostic review, and we're in design for the downtown. And we're not in this particular area. So we also have rolled out through that process any other alternative means as far as trying to provide relief outside of doing a grade separation. And between the MBTA and logistical concerns, there was no opportunity. We talked about, could we seasonally change it? The MBTA was not open to that. We talked about if we could do it, first and last train, lock it overnight, and that wasn't open as well. So it has to be a permanent grade separation. And what I will say, at least my hope is on this project, that the MBTA is heavily in favor of grade separation because it will be a crossing removal. And so we're hoping that this will get more support for collaboration than we have had on the rest of the bike zone.
Karis, did you just say that they have denied our request to close it seasonally and then?
Correct, they do not allow for intermittent, they would, if we were to lock it, or even work with them to lock it, they would continue to blow the horns. They don't allow for intermittent quiet zones.
We checked on that one with the FRA as well. The FRA also agreed that they couldn't do a seasonal or a quote unquote locked gate when it's not in use.
Thank you. All right, other questions on the golf course feasibility?
Yeah, so I don't quite understand where the number comes from and why, you know, because we have so much unknowns on the other part that I'd much rather see that get progressed with certainty rather than kind of going down on another path that I might only serve to confuse the first path that we don't have definitive information for people on. I think that we could fit this in either through current discussions with the golf club that our committee or other people could have, and Karis and others. I'd be happy to be a part of it. I just don't see the need where we are overall, and I think it could be a tough town meeting discussion to sort of just introduce this as a $44,000 item. So I'm not in favor of going forward with it. I'm in favor of studying it and discussing it, but I don't think we need to have do it through an appropriation or, you know, through a separate consulting contract.
I'm hoping that one of the ideas here would be to sort of bring this up to the point where there is a number that, you know, can be sort of at least ballpark or maybe better than ballpark compared. You know, this would result in some plans. Literally the only thing I did with my time between the time I got this in the email and you know, was read it and look at it. And I think it's a thing would be helpful for us to have done. I went so far as to do my own back of the envelope estimate based on 50 years in the business, not looking at their ultimate number, but I did my back of the envelope number and I came within 1%. They are producing plans. There's a lot of specifics in here about what they're doing. I think it'd be, I guess what I'm saying is it's worth the money to have the information that would result, in my opinion. You know, it's not that we couldn't, you know, hold conversations ourselves, but the question I think about turning that into conceptual, you know, concept drawings and reasonably hard, you know, planning level construction numbers is maybe something we wouldn't be able to do ourselves that effectively.
But you're not going to be getting that for this $44,000.
You're not gonna get which?
You're not going to get that for this $44,000. You're not going to get any different numbers than, and I have no issue with what they presented, but it'll be no different than the spreadsheet we got for the $7.6 million.
If I can just jump in, we'll actually be
Yeah.
able to give you better construction numbers for the culvert installation than we can with, you know, MBTA traffic, rail signal equipment at this point. We've got a lot of experience with culverts and all that, so we can get you solid numbers within reason for the feasibility study.
So I'm just saying, again, the reason we went for feasibility is because we're not sure what we're designing yet at this point. We're not sure the location, we're not sure how it will interact with the course itself, and there's some other drainage features in that general area.
Yep.
And so I think the goal was to figure out where we actually would place a culvert if we were to add a culvert to that project.
So I
I
think
don't
there's
disagree. I don't disagree, but that's not what you spend tax levy money on. And again, I'm not asking for it. I'm just, that's my point on it.
All right, so there's an agreement that we're gonna need to do feasibility for the culvert. The question is when that occurs and with what funds? Is that the issue, John?
That's a fair way to put it.
So I guess
Okay.
if I may, my perception of the historical conversation of the last couple of years among us, but also in town meeting has been, we proceeded with the quiet zone town meeting warrant article because that was more understandable what the potential solution sets could be, because they're defined. There's a menu of potential quiet zone solutions by intersection. And so, and we had some degree of insight from previous studies that had been done of what those may look like. So there seemed to be a clear regulatory path and a sort of a defined menu of options. And my perception is that we had not been as comfortable moving forward with the golf course because there was less clarity on what exactly the pathway would be. My sense is it sounds like there is now more of a consensus among a lot of the stakeholders involved of what might be the only possibility to explore to pursue something. And so I guess my thought would be, given that, it'd be worthwhile to further evaluate that, because I think, as we heard at the town meeting, when this warrant, the warrant that operationalized the diagnostic team study and everything else, there was concern raised about the fact that golf course was being left behind or left out. And while this is not to say it's necessarily going to catch up, but it would at least allow the discussion around that to advance with more knowledge about what are the factors involved, what are the issues we might need to deal with. Because, the one thing with introducing a culvert into the golf course is, as Karis just said, we don't know exactly where it goes. There might be ways to leverage existing physical features of the golf course, so there might be a pretty dramatic adjustment to the physical features, and it would be helpful, I think, for us to understand that. Would be my general view. I think there's value in trying to advance our insights into that now that there's sort of a one or none solution set there.
I don't think that John denied, I don't mean to put words in John's mouth. I don't think that John denied there was value. I think John,
No. Yeah.
No, I don't. I think it's the timing of it and the manner of it. And I just, particularly because we're not going forward with the other, right, which I'm in agreement with. I just look logistically that, if there's another way to do it, whether through a reserve fund transfer or just something, I just don't think that sort of bringing this out in this manner with just this article, when there's so many other unknowns that people are going to have questions about, it's going to turn into sort of a life of its own. And so I'm kind of just looking at it from that point of view more than anything. Not that it shouldn't be studied but it's just, is this the right way to go about getting that study for this purpose done?
John, are you willing to talk about a reserve fund transfer? Normally, this is not the time of year that we're having those discussions.
Well,
but-
I think at a certain point in time, yes. I mean, not today or tomorrow, but I think, in the quarter, after town meeting, between then and January, yes.
Just want to confirm with the consultant, but when I look at their proposal, they say that's about a 12-week turnaround time. So just for like context for operating budget purposes, sometimes the struggle we have is that it spans multiple fiscal years. So this doesn't seem to have as long of a turnaround time as some of the other projects we've done.
But also, hope springs eternal, that we are gonna get to a point where we have a design for the rest of the quiet zone. It would be helpful if this information were ready, at least to be better integrated in concert with that. So that means mapping out all those different timelines to see when you'd have to start or when we'd have to bring that request. So I think we need to think through that and then maybe have another conversation with John about what that might look like. Does that make sense to you, John?
Yes. I'm just trying to
Okay.
look ahead to see what October 20th could look like. And I have reservations about this as the only article on the quiet zone going forward then. And is there a better or other way to handle getting this information and getting the funds for this information?
Okay. I had somebody ask me today, a citizen from town, if we would be willing to ask the T, since they're already going at 5 miles an hour through town, if they would just stop at each intersection which would not necessitate their blowing the horn in theory if they stopped and looked.
They don't do that on Great Plain Ave where they do stop.
Stop at Great Pine Ave, do they? I mean.
Well, when they stop at the station, right?
They stop at the station,
So just before.
You see, you're thinking about stopping.
right
At
at,
the intersection.
right at the intersection.
Now, one question that comes out is, most operations, correct me if you think this is true of the MBTA, if you actually stop and then they're gonna put the train in motion again, you have to do a horn signal to advise that you're doing that. Is that right?
They don't do an extra signal at West Street when they put the train in motion there.
No, which is, well, they're starting, they don't stop at the crossing after stopping after the station though. But what
Right,
I'm
so then
hearing
they
is you come
start in
right
the
up on the
station.
crossing and then stopping
Oh, then
and
you
then
would say
proceeding.
they need to blow their horn
I
again there.
think you have to do a couple of toots to,
They
To
do
know
that
to-
even
to
on
put it in
lines like
motion.
Natick to depress that they don't blow the horn otherwise. But when they leave the station, they're always blowing the horn and there's no roads. Level crossings.
All right, so that doesn't buy us anything either.
I guess the question is, is there an operational option, right? That's all.
Is there an operational option? Tweaking their horn volume is another option. We keep asking.
So in my opinion, no, I don't believe there's an operational option for them to not blow horns at grade crossings. They may have some internal rules in regards to some of their yard crossings, some of their private maintenance facility crossings. But there's clear expectation in federal law that they're blowing their horn, regardless of if they stop at it. It's the two longs, a short and a long. The
We
only
know.
federal, go ahead.
No,
Yes.
I just think we know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, unfortunately, on slow moving trains, all that's really done is made that last long go even longer as they slow creep across the grade crossing.
Correct. Okay. All right, any other thoughts from people? This has not been an uplifting meeting, I recognize that. Unfortunately, I think it's been a lot of time, a lot of talk, a lot of trying to engage the T. I appreciate the efforts of Benesh and Ty and Bond to try to work with us and work with the T to make that happen. But it's been a long, frustrating summer, I do understand that.
Yes, I'd just add in terms of next steps, also the select board, you're meeting on Wednesday, the 24th. We will have this as an agenda item because they knew that this group was meeting, would make a recommendation about if those articles were going to come off. So we'll relay the conclusion here. And John, I know you're meeting with the finance committee at the same time. So
No, we're not gonna meet.
Oh.
We have nothing to meet on the 24th. So our next meeting is not gonna be, and then the following week is October 1st is a Jewish holiday. So we're not gonna meet again until October 8th.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Sam?
Katie, I'm just wondering, did MBTA or Ryan specifically ever respond to your email? After I think it was the second one afterward. I don't. He may have not responded to everybody, so I was wondering if he had responded to you specifically.
No, I had a variety of outreach and I have not heard back.
Understood.
Okay. If there is no further business, then I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, if it's needed.
And I need to call a roll call. John,
Yes.
Lars,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna hope that the next time that we meet, that we have better news. So we had said we were gonna meet this time, once we actually had made some progress, and therefore we deferred and deferred and deferred because the progress didn't seem sufficient. I think our next meeting, again, we'll hope that we have progress. Although the one other thing that I'm hearing is this question of if we go for a reserve fund transfer. I don't think we need a meeting. I think we have adequate information and a plan for how we would go forward with that, right? Okay, just double checking to be sure. There's concurrence. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Good night.
Right, folks.
Right, thanks.